Hello, friends. Is corruption good or bad? In general, of course, it's a strange question, isn't it? Of course, it's bad. In any case, that's what we were taught since childhood. We were brought up to be impatient with this terrible phenomenon. We listen to journalists, investigators, who focus specifically on the fight against corruption. It is assumed that if we completely eradicate corruption, then both the economy and production, as if by magic, will soar to the skies, universal paradise and prosperity will come. Is this really so? Let's figure it out. And first of all, we should define what corruption is. There are many legal definitions, but they all boil down to one simple thesis: it is an unfair distribution of income, an unfair solution to any problems. Most people associate this concept with the concept of bribe. But a second question immediately arises: what is justice? What are the criteria of justice? And here we cannot do without philosophical understanding. Justice certainly exists, but the problem is that it only exists in the minds of those who take it upon themselves to discuss it. This means that it is a relative, not an absolute concept. Everyone has their own justice. If you are a young and strong wolf, then you have caught up with and eaten a hare, overtaken your victim. This is, of course, fair, from the wolf's side. The wolf has had his fill and fed his wolf cubs. But from the hare's side, whose life was cut short suddenly, from his position, everything that happens will be extremely unfair. If you are old and weak, then sooner or later you yourself will die and become a victim of other living organisms. At the very least, we will all one day become food for microorganisms, for bacteria. Or our ashes, our carbon, organic matter will pass to other living beings. And in this, of course, there is a certain universal natural justice. A certain balance at the highest natural level. But is there a single justice at the local level, in the relationship between the wolf and the hare? Perhaps it does, but it is relative and depends on many variables. Well, there are absolutely fair, at first glance, phenomena. For example, we are now watching this video, sitting in our warm and cozy homes. Someone is also eating delicious food while watching. It seems fair to us, 100%. We worked, earned money, paid all the taxes, and now we are deservedly resting, sitting in front of our TV or smartphone in our home. Is it fair or not? From your point of view and the point of view of some people around you, of course, it is fair. But in order to heat your home, oil had to be extracted, many living beings, billions of microorganisms suffered. Living organisms suffer because of human technogenic activity, sometimes it even causes environmental disasters. About justice, for example, they forgot to ask the chicken you ate for dinner yesterday. To buy and make furniture, the sofa you are sitting on now, they had to cut down a number of trees and many living beings suffered too. An arrogant and one-sided position is to believe that only man is the crown of nature, its master, and therefore has the right to rule, kill and enslave all other species. This position, unfortunately, is very common. But it has nothing to do with absolute justice for everyone. Thus, we make an obvious conclusion: absolute justice does not exist in nature, it is always relative and determined by those who try to reason about such justice at a given moment in time, those who determine meanings, ideology, who impose their narratives on us. Whether you like it or not, but natural justice is unattainable, and since we, people, are known to be part of nature, this inevitably applies to us. Although, of course, it is more comfortable for us to deceive ourselves, to think that the world is better than it really is. But let's leave philosophy for a while and try to engage in practice. So, let's imagine that we are building a house. We wanted to build a house. Workers and builders receive a salary of $1,000, a foreman at a construction site, $3,000, an engineer receives $5,000 a month for his work, a contractor, $20,000. And the official who allocated a suitable site for construction, let's say, takes a bribe, the size of which is limited only by the profitability of the entire project. If the contractor benefits, he will give $1 million, and if not, he will pay a little less. This is an obviously unfair corruption scheme. At first glance, corruption is definitely bad. And now we will try to do the same thing, but in a hypothetical ideal state, with a complete absence of corruption. We will model, and what will happen? So to speak, we will go to the blue dream of all fighters against corruption. The general labor market will still determine that workers will receive their hard-earned $1,000, they will hardly be allowed to receive more. The foreman, the same $3,000, the engineer, his $5,000. And the official will only get his salary, which is due to him. He is honest, he does not take any bribes. And where will the extra money go? The answer is obvious, most likely they will go to the contractor as excess profit. That is, it is the contractor who will take all the extra money in such a scheme. And all the ordinary people and you will rejoice and call such a society fair. The contractor is unlikely to share his profit with the workers. Why? The labor market has already determined everything. A cleaner's pipes cost so much. A crane operator, so much, an engineer, so much. But the paradox is that construction in such conditions may not begin at all. There will be red tape, since the official is now not interested in the speedy execution of all the necessary papers and documents. If the law states that the application review can last up to 3 to 4 months, then the official will drink coffee, go for a smoke break, serve the allotted time, think about his rights and join trade unions. And if he notices mistakes in the documents, then everything will drag on for many years. Why should he rush anywhere? We work from 8 to 4 o'clock, with a lunch break. His salary is small, fixed, and does not depend on the number of houses built. The official will simply sit around in his office, will not be truly effective. He, by and large, will not care whether the house is built or not. Unlike the first, corrupt system, where the entire chain is interested in the successful implementation of the project. An official who took a bribe will most likely promote the project in every possible way, rush the secretary, his subordinates, stay late at work in order to quickly draw up all the necessary documents. This scheme is closer to nature, to the interactions that occur between representatives of the fauna. You may ask, why are those countries where, as we are told, the level of corruption is quite low, very economically developed and rich? The whole point is that corruption is simply legalized there, it is taken out of the gray zone. Corruption is hidden in the conditions of private property, when stealing from yourself does not make any sense. Laws on lobbying, for example. Legal civilized mechanisms have been invented that, as if replacing a bribe, help to create the interest of all parties in a conditional chain. Thus, the main measure of manifestations of grassroots corruption is the development of civil institutions. Let me give you an example: legal institutions and the judicial system. In order to resolve any issue in a conditional rich and highly developed country, you need to contact a lawyer, an intermediary, and he will help you solve this problem for a certain fee. Does this remind you of anything? A bribe is simply already included in expenses, taxes have been paid on it. And the fact that it is not called that will not make the economy better, it will not add money to your pocket. The lawyer himself does not create any real benefits in this chain, except for his mediation services. In order to have a higher chance of solving your issue, you should hire not just a simple lawyer, a cheap one, but preferably a high-status one, who will have extensive experience in moving around in judicial circles. So that such an agent, lawyer or attorney must have personal connections, acquaintances of the judge, the status of a successful and famous person in the judicial system. Any American, for example, will confirm that the status of the lawyer you hire is important. And this is not always knowledge, but rather connections, the ability to communicate with the judge, the ability to negotiate. If you pay more to the intermediary, most likely you will ultimately get the desired result. Thus, the level of corruption registered by special agencies is usually higher in those countries where civil institutions are poorly developed. That is, it is simply a marker of the development of official institutions, nothing more. This does not mean that there are no corruption costs in successful and rich countries. For a better understanding, I will give an example from the sphere of professional sports. Everyone remembers that for a long time, Norwegian skiers and biathletes had no equal in competitions. And then, by chance, there was a leak of confidential medical data and the public learned that almost the entire Norwegian team consisted of sick athletes with dangerous diagnoses. That almost all skiers and biathletes have official medical reports with a diagnosis of bronchial asthma. Based on this, they could absolutely legally take bronchodilator drugs before competitions, which, of course, provided themselves with a huge advantage due to better enrichment of the blood with oxygen, better endurance. The paradox is that everything seems to be according to the law, but for some reason, fans from other countries had a certain feeling of injustice. Remember, the famous tennis player Maria Sharapova was disqualified for several years for the harmless drug mildronate or meldonium. And, for example, the American tennis players, the Williams sisters, completely legally, with the permission of the anti-doping organization, for a long time, as reported by the independent press, took steroid hormones. Because they, you see, also had diagnoses and there were no questions to them. Everything is according to the law, and therefore fair. Meldonium is a drug more like vitamins and it does not have full international recognition, it was used mainly in post-Soviet countries. And steroid hormones are very specific drugs used everywhere. Thus, friends, corruption or its analogues exist in absolutely all countries of the world and in all spheres of human life. Simply because a person is a representative of the species Homo sapiens, the order, primates, the class, mammals, and so on according to the nomenclature. The animal kingdom. Yes, by the way, the kingdom to which Homo sapiens belongs is called the animal kingdom. All claims are to the official science of biology. All indignant and dissenting, fanatically religious people, I send back to school, to study school textbooks on biology. In any, even successful and rich, country with the interests of those in power, everything is in perfect order. So, the scheme works. Lawyers and numerous intermediaries receive their reward, for example, for pushing through laws needed by business. Everything is legalized. I suggest you open a list of countries, a kind of rating, according to the so-called Corruption Perception Index, CPI. And what do we see there? All Scandinavian, developed European countries are quite high, at the top of this rating. For example, the USA is in 24th place in the world, and China is only in 76th place. Does this mean that China is developing economically much worse, that there is less production of goods and services? I will give just two interesting figures that were voiced by economist Leonid Waldman from 2011 to 2013, that is, for 3 years, China used 6.6 gigatons of cement for construction. So that you understand, 1 gigaton is 10 tons raised to the 9th power. In just 3 years, China's industry and construction used 6.6 gigatons of cement. For comparison, the United States spent about 4.5 gigatons over the entire 20th century. In China, 6.6 over 3 years, and in the United States, only 4.5 over more than 100 years. And in which country is industrial production rapidly developing? Construction is the engine of the economy, and it is developing in China at a much higher rate. Moreover, as many claim, there is no freedom in China, no democracy, and the level of corruption there is much higher. Even judging by the number of people imprisoned for corruption crimes. In no country in the world can anything be done without mutual benefit between people. I have already discussed the topic of what parasites are in one of the old videos on this channel, which is called Parasites. What professions are needed and important? How ordinary people perceive it. This is how the human psyche works. People need a kind of illusion in the form of a primitive slogan, we need to fight corruption. But this only becomes effective when it is possible to legalize this very corruption, to bring it out of the shadows. Do you think that what is called corruption hinders the development of the Chinese economy? Or, on the contrary, only helps? Rather, neither one nor the other. The correct answer is, it has little effect at all. It is simply a marker, external attributes of the development of civil institutions and public relations. Like rust and chipped paint on metal parts of a car. Does a bad paint job prevent a car from moving from point A to point B? In some ways it does, because a car doesn't look as attractive without paint, but it has almost no effect on the running mechanisms. Contrary to popular belief, it is not the level of corruption that influences the economy itself, but rather the level of labor productivity, labor discipline, and technological development. Wealth and well-being are influenced by a million different factors, including the presence or absence of natural resources in the country, smart and enterprising citizens, the level of education, historical and geographical factors in the country's development, and much more. And corruption is, of course, unsightly, terrible. It repels investors, but all this is only indirect harm to the economy, associated with the image. It may not have any direct strong impact on people's well-being at all. And in some systems, when the mechanisms of the economy are completely rusty, corrupt relations can even help a little. They seem to lubricate the rusty creaking mechanisms, restoring the missing links and helping the economy not to stop. Everything is like with people. Might is right. Unfortunately, nothing works differently in nature. The capitalist model exists today in almost all countries of the world. Systems of checks and balances, special anti-monopoly services, self-regulatory systems of certification of lawyers, judges, attorneys, employees. Any official, before receiving this high position, goes through many difficult tests, selections, career deprivations. Sometimes, deprivations and even humiliations. On the way to building an outstanding career as an official, people have to, as they say, lick the ass of their superiors, sometimes step over the heads of their colleagues. Is this fair or not? There is no clear answer. One thing is for sure, this corresponds to the natural nature of man. This is typical of human communities. With the help of hundreds of mechanisms, a special system is built that must be perceived by society, by the majority of people, as fair. Friends, these are my thoughts. Perhaps you will not agree with them. Write your objections and your opinion in the comments. Thank you all for your attention. I hope there is something to think about. Subscribe. I wish you all the best and see you soon.